Recording. Hello, YouTube. Here we are. We're doing another Outlive podcast. It is chapter 5. Once again, this is book club. If you're looking at the screen right now, I've got Peter Attia's website up, his YouTube, and I've got his book out in front here, Outlive, the Science and Art of Longevity, Peter Attia, MD. I'm impressed by Peter quite a bit, but it's also becoming really apparent that he lives something of a charmed and well-financed life, as we will read in this chapter. In fact, that's my initial impression. Is where did the guy get all his money? I mean, seriously. Let me start. It says here, in the fall of 2016, I met with 3 friends at the George Bush Intercontinental Airport at Houston to embark on a somewhat unusual vacation. Does he come from oil money? Does anybody know? How does he have all his money? I still want to know these things. It's like, he went to med school. He paid a lot of money for that. Very cozy in radio today. Oh, thank you for that. I know I put my podcaster radio voice on. I also got, if you're looking at the stream here, last night I spent like 5 hours with the stream. They put on random videos while I clean my room. And I have a new mic stand. It's this arm that comes out and puts the mic right in front of you. It's so nice. I really love it. Because I don't have to trip over it, when you're dancing and stuff. So anyway, so in 2016, Mr. Peter Attia and his buddies went to Easter Island. Raise your hand if you know what Easter Island is. Whenever I think about Easter Island, I always remember in the 80s, I had a T-shirt that I cut off, and it was the island. It was Utah as an island. It was like the shape of Utah had kind of a cartoony feel to it, sort of like, I don't know, like you would see in any of the cartoons of the day. Anyway, and it was imagining Utah as an island, right? I mean, Utah is already one of the number one go-to destination sites for sports of all kinds. An outdoor retailer has their conference there pretty much every year. And so anyway, this T-shirt was playing on the idea of it being an island. And of course, there was these big head statues. And if you don't know what they are, Google Easter Island statues. He talks about them right now. He says, most people know about Easter Island because of the 1,000 or so mysterious giant stone heads called, I'm going to butcher this, Moai, dotting its shoreline. But there's a lot more to it. In fact, studying the history of Easter Island and why people ran out and why they died and why they actually kind of ate themselves out of living. They literally did. They extincted themselves, sort of thing, which is not the topic today. But Easter Island all by itself is really interesting. And I just remember because anytime somebody thinks about, islands and island living, they immediately think of these big head statues, right? And they were these things were. The first time I ever seen one of those was on this, what I thought was a rather awesome T-shirt, having wanted to be a beachgoer my whole life, growing up in Utah, completely landlocked, even though I grew up in Anaheim when I was young. So anyway, Easter Island, the natives actually call Easter Island, the proper name is Rapa Nui. It is an extremely isolated and spectacular place. The triangle-shaped island is roughly 63 square miles. And it's what left of a trio of ancient volcanoes that surged up 2 miles from the bottom of the seabed. One end of the island is ringed by high cliffs plunging down. The nearest human settlement is more than 1,000 miles away. So Peter and his buddies flew to this island. Why? We'll get there. We were not tourists. We were on a pilgrimage of sorts to honor the molecule which has become known as rapamycin. Is it rapamycin? Did I say that right? I am so butchering this. I am not a medical professional. Rapamycin has transformed medicine, giving millions of patients a second chance of life. So here's the title of the chapter. Eat Less, Live Longer. The Science of Hunger and Health. So, you can probably guess, if we don't eat, does that make us live longer? Kinda. That's kind of the spoiler there. And rapamycin is like right dead center in the middle of this conversation about how we can live longer. Absolutely fascinated by it. I have never even heard of this molecule before. I'm going to use Peter's term. He loves to use the term molecule for everything. Uh, we're not, I said the hipster. I said the rich hipster. Oh, he's going to talk about fasting and eating less. He actually doesn't talk about that directly. I thought for sure he was going to jump right into fasting, but stay tuned. The discovery came about, at least in part, thanks to the work of one member of the group, David Sabatini, who was a professor of biology at MIT's Whitehead Institute. I mean, this guy hangs with people. Peter Attia hangs with people who have bank. He just like, this is like a rich smart club, rich kids smart club. I swear, I think he's in it. I don't know. I'm like, where did you get? I mean, because he's like, well, I was talking to Obama the other day, and I didn't interview. You know, he's Wolverine's personal doctor. Wolverine and Deadpool are going to be in the next movie together. I'm excited. Also on a trip was another biologist named Navdeep Chandral, Nav to his friends. And another one of his friends, Tim, who's an entrepreneur and an author, not a scientist. Of course, he's probably funding the trip. But he has a knack for asking the right questions and bringing a fresh perspective to something. I forgot to say that Peter actually was in finance for a very long time, and he's brilliant with math, which means he's probably well invested himself, unlike me, who started his own business with his retirement money and is now living in an apartment with popcorn ceilings. Yeah, okay, we're going to go on. Why are you distracting my chat? Don't talk about things that are off topic, please. Thank you. It's very sad that Brahm has died. Yes, it is. So, bringing it back. Plus, I knew he would be willing to swim the ocean every day, reducing my chances of being eaten by a shark by 50%. That's a callback to Peter's extreme interest in long distance swimming, which he does out in the wild ocean. So his rich entrepreneur friend likes to swim with him, apparently. So one purpose of our trip was to scout out the location of a scientific conference that would be entirely devoted to research about the amazing substance. But most importantly, I want to make a pilgrimage to the place where this extraordinary molecule had come from and pay homage to its almost accidental discovery. Please do not talk about editors in my book club podcast. That's your only warning. I'm going to ban now. Your next warning will be a ban if you say anything more about it. Okay, thank you. I want to keep the topic. Stay on topic, people. Stay on topic. You can talk about that crap like any other time, but not now. All right. After we dropped off our luggage at our 30-room tourist hotel, our first stop was to Rano Kau. A 1,000-foot tall extinct volcano dominates the southwest corner of the island. So our destination was the center of the crater. There was a large swampy lake. So imagine this swampy lake in the middle. It's about a mile across in the middle of this crater. And they went there because it's been rumored for a long time that there are healing properties in the lake. This gets kind of interesting. It's almost like an Indiana Jones thing. According to a local legend, we had heard people were feeling sick. They would go there. They go in the crater. They spend a night there in the belly of the volcano, and they would get better. And this is the story where this mysterious, amazing molecule begins, rapamycin. So in 1964, a Canadian scientific and medical expedition arrived on Easter Island, having sailed from Halifax aboard a naval vessel. They spent several weeks there conducting research, gathering samples, and they'd heard about the healing properties, so they gathered a lot of samples, took them back. A few years later, a jar of Eastern Island dirt from that expedition landed on a biochemist's desk, Cyril Segal. I'm doing book club. What is the deal with distractions today? My wife has just entered. This is my podcast. My wife is I'm describing it to you. My wife has walked in and decided to show us a extremely disturbing...
Janelle has bread in Germany.
Bread in Germany?
I was like,
this is bread? We're talking about bread now?
She's like, I'm just going to... Because I was like, all I think of when you go to Germany...
It's a podcast. They can't see the thing, so describe it to me. I'm doing a podcast right now.
Oh, it's not a thing.
It's not. It's just... So tell me what you're... Describe it to me.
Whole grain
German bread and butter.
Like, oh,
it is absolutely amazing. It also...
real bread.
Yeah. Well, at least put it to the camera for the people who are here.
That's what I was going to do.
It's like... Yeah. All right. Some people can see it, but the podcast people
Oh,
can't see it. So
sorry. This is
there.
part of the podcast.
I just forgot to lock my door. It's my own
There you
fault.
go.
That's my wife for you. I have to show you this German bread right now in the middle of your podcast. But I mean, I don't care. I don't care. I'm me. It's good. It's good. I love my wife. I do. She's amazing. I just gave her a big hug. I have a tip. I have a tip for marital longevity. After you take a shower and you smell good, maybe you put a little of that cologne that maybe helped you guys meet or something. Go give your wife a big hug and say, "Here you go. I want you to help you remember that I don't stink all the time." I'm telling you, it will totally work. And then she'll remember you, especially if she's somebody, smells they're like really tied to memories, right? So then yeah, next time she thinks about it, she's like, "Oh God, he smelled so good when he gave me that hug this morning." As opposed to every other time when she like walks into the room and gets blown away by the fans in my gym while I'm working out or whatever. Where were we? Random distractions are common in podcasts. Well, good. Good. I don't know if I prefer Atia would actually eat bread. I don't think he would. That's kind of ironic. If he was gonna eat bread, he would eat German bread. We were literally talking about eat less, live longer, and she brings in this wonderful picture of like amazing German butter and like, you know, fantastic, rich, German bread. Actually, I'm gonna tie that in. I'm gonna tie that in because he says, yeah, I'm jumping ahead, but he does say later, he's like, for humans, it's actually a lot harder to not eat compared to the animals that we starved to death, literally. Oh God, science is so cruel sometimes. Anyway, okay, here we go. So they're on the island, and he's telling the backstory. So if you're making a film in your head, which I hope you are, then he's he's like, imagine a flashback. It's kind of like sepia color background, like not quite. It's got like the film is kind of stressed and stuff, and it's showing the backstory. And in 1964, which is not too far long ago, I guess you would still be color. So that vessel went to Easter Island. They took some dirt, and that dirt randomly landed on the desk of biochemist Surin Segal. No relation to the martial artist who's been banned from Saturday Night Live, who worked for a Canadian pharmaceutical company and then called Ayerst. Well, why does it matter what I guess it does. I don't care. So Segal found that I can't read that name without laughing. Segal found that his soil sample was saturated with a strange and potent antifungal agent that was seemingly produced by the soil bacterium Streptomyces hygroscopicus. So Peter insists on putting the actual names of everything here, which I cannot pronounce. Curious, Segal isolated bacterium and grew it in a culture, and he was like, "What the hell is this?" He named it rapamycin after Rapa Nui, the Easter Island. But then his pharmaceutical company, said, "Nope, destroy everything and stop working on that. You need to work on these other things that make us more money." I'm paraphrasing, obviously. Segal disobeyed the order like anyone with that last name would. One day, he smuggled a jar of rapamycin home from work. His son, Ajay, who was originally supposed to be the fifth member of our pilgrimage. Damn. I missed that part when I read it before. That Peter actually knows the son of the guy who got the Nobel, who discovered rapamycin. Damn. This guy is connected, man. Mr. Peter Attia is very well connected. And he's also very pedantic and science-based, which is great for us. His son, it's good to have a rich, smart guy on your side. His son, Ajay, who was originally supposed to be the fifth member of our pilgrimage, remembers opening the freezer and getting ice cream one time and saw a thing that said, "Do not eat." Do not eat. Deadly biochemicals is in his fridge. I'm sure there are so many stories. There's a story behind that label. Somebody probably put one of his science experiments like in the microwave. Beep. I used to have live typhoid in my refrigerator. Really? That's probably not something you want to share with the public. I'm not going to disclose your name unless the I don't know, Center for Disease Control come raid you. The jars survived the family's move to Princeton. They actually moved, and this is like trying to keep a kombucha mother alive, and we can't even do that. Well, we did pretty well. We did pretty well, but they've got this like groundbreaking molecule sample right there, and they moved to Princeton. They moved from was it MIT to Princeton? Anyway, so guess what? As most farmers, I love this part. This is really great. So later, when they didn't say this, but the near bankrupt pharmaceutical giant, the Ayerst Wyeth, another pharmaceutical giant, consumed Ayerst in kind of like a, kind of like a white blood cell would, a diseased, dying thing. In 1987, his new bosses asked Seagal if he had anything interesting projects he'd like to pursue. That's very 1980s of them. Is there anything you'd like to work on? What would you like to work on? God, that's the kind of company you want to work for right there. So he pulled a jar out of the fridge and freezer, sorry, and went back out of the freezer and he went back to work. Seagal believed that he had found a cure for athlete's foot, which would have been just enough, but at the point, he recalls that his son made a homemade ointment for his son out of rapamycin for a neighbor. Oh, who had developed some sort of weird body rash. How did that go down? I mean, seriously, how did that go down? What is it like to live next to like a famous, extremely curious autodidactic biochemist? I see you have a rash. I got something for you. Would you like to be my clinical trial? Would you like to be my clinical? I mean, seriously, how did that go down? I mean, I want details, Peter. Peter, I want the details. He's like, I don't know the details. You're going to have to ask. But you know his son, so get more details. Somehow, this neighbor who's got a rash, who knows where, is suddenly treated. And so I can just see Seagal. I can see him like in his garage, because, he doesn't have like a jalopy car in there or something like that, He's in his garage with, lots of freezers. And he's like, okay, let me see here. If I put a little bit of this cream in there and this stuff like this, okay, I think we got it. Okay. Hey, you remember that rash that you didn't want anybody to know about that you put some of this on there. I just made this for you. What is it? Just put it on there. No, seriously, what is it? Well, it's this experimental drug that came from Easter Island, that's been sitting in my freezer for the last, 5 years, but through 2 moves. But I'm sure it's going to help you with your rash. I really want to see what it does for you. Things to cure rashes, cure dandruff. Absolutely. So anyway, her rash cleared up almost immediately, and that's also telling. It's a female. So I'm telling you, there's something more to the story there. It's like, was he trying to win points with her? Was he married? Was he single? Was he, hey baby, I got an ointment for your rash. I don't know. I have questions. That's all I'm saying. But rapamycin turned out to be, maybe he's just a good guy. I'm sure he was a good guy. I'm sure that was it. I mean, we already know he was a good guy because he stole this thing from his first employer because he knew it was going to be good for humanity. So we already know that Seagal is a good guy, unlike the other one. So, but rapamycin turned out to be so much. Now, you're never going to forget his name now, are you? See what I did there? Memory association. It proved to have powerful effects on the immune system. And in 1999, turns out it was approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to help transplant patients accept new organs. Think about that for a second. Rapamycin, this compound, this molecule from, this kind of Indiana Jones-ly discovered expedition in the middle of an extinct crater, is now helping people to keep their kidneys when they have a transplant. How cool is that? How cool is that story? I did not even know about this story. I'm 55. I did not know. I've never even heard this story before. And it's actually relatively modern. This happened in 1999. So this happened while I was raising toddlers-ish. I'm sure they would probably disagree with being called toddlers. Let's see, hold on. Can't do that math right now. As a surgical resident, this is Peter. I used to give it out like TikToks to kidneys and liver transplant patients, sometimes referred to as, here we go again, another name, sirolimus. Rapamycin is also used as a coating on arterial stents because it prevents the stented blood vessels from reoccluding. There's a word. That's a $10 word. The hits kept on coming even after Segal died in 2003. In 2007, a rapamycin analog. This is a new term too. An analog is not digital, nerds. I know you're out there. No, an analog is like something that's equivalent to it, but not the real thing. But it's not a generic, right? In fact, he says here, a drug analog is a compound with similar but not identical molecular structure. So there you go. It was approved by the FDA for use against a type of kidney cancer, which is important. As some of you may know, my wife is a kidney cancer survivor. She's only got one kidney. So this is very interesting. And maybe that's why she had to come in here today. I'm going to go talk to her about this. We're going to Trader Joe's later. I may or may not take the camera with me. It is kind of a date, just a plug for that. The compound was deemed so important that by the early 2000s, Wyeth Everest placed a plaque on Easter Island, not far from the crater, honoring it. But it got stolen by the time we were there. So why is rapamycin so interesting, and why is it a part of this chapter? It turns out it tends to slow down the process of cellular growth and division. Dr. Sabatini was one of a handful of scientists who picked up the baton from Segal, seeking to explain this phenomenon. Understanding rapamycin became his life's work, beginning when he was a graduate student. Working from a sheaf of papers from Segal himself, he photocopied. Sabatini helped to elucidate how this unique compound worked on the cell. Ultimately, he and others discovered that rapamycin acted directly on a very important intercellular protein called mTOR. Not to be confused with, that decentralized network that hackers use. So mTOR was the thing. mTOR was the thing. For mechanistic target of rapamycin, why do we care about mTOR? Because the mechanism turns out to be one of the most important mediators of longevity at the cellular level. Not only that, but it also is highly, quote, conserved, meaning that it is found in virtually all forms of life. This is so cool. Okay, listen to this. Ranging from yeast to flies to worms and right on top all the way up to humans. In biology, conserved means that something has been passed on via natural selection across multiple species and classes of organisms. That means we all have it. A sign that evolution has deemed it so important that everything gets it. It was uncanny. This exotic molecule found only in isolated scrap of land in the middle of the ocean acts almost like a switch that inhibits a very specific cellular mechanism that exists in nearly everything that lives, including spiders, he talks about later. It was a perfect fit, and this fact still blows my mind every time I think about it. It blows my mind, too. The idea that we have something so significant in common with all other living things is just super cool to me. That's just like really, really cool. The job of mTOR is basically to balance organisms' need to grow and reproduce against its availability of nutrients. And here we go with the, eating thing. When food is plentiful, mTOR is activated in the cell, goes into growth mode, producing new proteins and undergoing cell division, as with the ultimate goal of reproduction. When nutrients are scarce, mTOR is suppressed, and cells go into a kind of recycle mode. We're gonna read about this again later. Breaking down the cellular components and generally cleaning house. Cell division and growth slow down or stop, and reproduction is put on hold to conserve energy. To some extent, and this is Sabatini saying this directly, to some extent, mTOR is like the general contractor for the cell. It lies at the nexus of a lot of things, and mTOR basically has a finger in every major process in the cell. It means it's so important that it affects everything. Well, what is mTOR? mTOR is actually directly affected by rapamycin. And you find this a lot, that there's this chain of relational dependencies or something that trigger, and that's how this is all going to go down. So On July 9, 2009, a brief but important science story reported in the New York Times antibiotic delayed aging experiments with mice. The headline was horrible because it wasn't even an antibiotic. They were talking about rapamycin. And it was found that rapamycin extended the life in mice 13% for females and 9% for males. The story was buried and no one paid attention. Paraphrasing. No other molecule had been shown to extend lifespan in a mammal ever. Period. Ever. Rapamycin is the first and so far only molecule shown to extend life in mammals. The results were especially convincing because the experiment had been run by 3 different teams. Oh, this is so important. I can't wait to read it. And 3 separate labs on a total of 1,900 genetically diverse animals, the most consistent across the board. Even better, other labs quickly and readily reproduced these results. So, with relative rarity, even with much ballyhooed findings. Okay, he sidebars a bit here to repeat something that I've heard Adam Ruin Science talk about. This is so important. I've actually brought this up on the podcast before, just in my stream, just casually. And I'm going to read it. This is so important. You might find it surprising, but many of the most headline-grabbing studies, the ones that you're most likely to read about in the newspaper, on the news or something, were never repeated. Peter doesn't suggest why. Adam Conover does. Adam suggests that the reason they're not repeated is because repeating the findings of another study in order to confirm it is not sexy enough to get money and popularity and fame, so people don't do it. And that's actually, when people throw stones at science, usually that's it. The reason that science has failed us over and over again, he gives us a specific example, is because it's bad science. It's not because science. It's because it's bad science. It's science that's not following the scientific method for the sake of capitalist gain. Bottom line. Case in point, a well-publicized finding from 2006. This one blows me away, and I have been talking about this forever. A well-publicized study in 2006 found that red wine is good for you, basically. And this compound called resveratrol, was the reason for longevity, and 60 Minutes did a thing on it and said, hey, red wine, drink a glass of red wine, it'll be good for you. It's all bullshit. All of that is bullshit, my friends. I have been, now, it does have polyphenols in it. Red wine does have polyphenols, but so does a lot of other stuff. That particular study, supplements of this drug went off the root, went crazy. Other labs could not reproduce it. Not a single lab could reproduce the initial findings. When it was subjected to the same sort of rigorous testing as rapamycin, as part of the National Institute of Aging program to test, it failed. It did not extend its lifespan in a single diverse population of normal mice. In other words, bullshit. It was bullshit. It was good bullshit because it sold a bunch of stuff for a bunch of people, including news stories, because, hey, you can live longer if you drink wine. So they jumped on board, just like the study about fat being bad for you. That's also another one that was bullshit. That study actually has, half of the study is how good fat is good for you. And nobody ever said that. And we had the non-fat epidemic of the late 80s and 90s, which put America into massive obesity mode because they ate sugar instead of healthy fats, which would have satiated them. And if you go, there's crazy documents on the cause of the obesity epidemic, and it was fundamentally driven by sugar consumption because people thought fat was bad. And the way to alter that is to put a lot of stuff in there. So that's actually one of the greatest tragedies of modern capitalism, in my opinion, because we all bought into it. We bought SnackWells and ate those things like crazy, and they were full of sugar. And now we have the highest occurrence of diabetes and obesity ever recorded. Because why? And now finally people are like, hey, this other fat is good for you. Actually, you need it to live. You need it for brain function. You need it for a bunch of other things. And it didn't get any press because it wasn't sexy. The same is true of other well-hyped supplements such as nicotinamide ribosine, NR. It too failed to extend lifespan consistent in mice. Of course, there's no data showing that any of these supplements lengthen life or improve in health. But study after study since 2009 has confirmed that rapamycin can indeed extend mouse lifespan. So it has held up. to lots and lots of scientific scrutiny. The fact that Mr. Attia has included this in this particular chapter really, really increases my level of trust in what he's doing, despite the fact that he discloses later that he's very financially tied to the success of rapamycin because he's invested heavily in the research on it. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, damn. Mr. Mathematician, Financial Investor does a whole chapter on how great rapamycin is, as rapamycin heads as an analog to rapamycin that doesn't have as many side effects, heads into clinical trials. I can read between those lines. I'm not an idiot. But the fact is that he does disclose it, and he also talks about the importance of the science behind it. So even if he stands to get really wealthy, wealthier than he already is, I'm willing to hear him out. So, yeah. You can't make money off a good diet. I know, it doesn't, yeah. Or, let's make people sick so we can sell them a drug. To scientists who study aging, the life-extending effect of rapamycin, I'm reading from the book again, was hugely exciting, but it was also exactly a surprise. It wasn't a surprise. It appeared to represent a culmination of decades, if not centuries, of observations about how food we eat correlates to how we live longer. The idea goes that all the way back to Hippocrates, but the more modern experiments have demonstrated over and over the same thing. Here it is. Reducing food intake of lab animals could lengthen their lives. Reducing food intake could lengthen their lives. But at what cost? And the rest of the chapter talks about that. The first person to really put the idea of eating less into practice in a rigorous document way was not a Greek, but he was a 16th century fat Italian businessman. I put fat in there. Named Alvis Cornaro, self-made real estate developer who had become tremendously wealthy by draining swamps and turning them into production farmland. And I'm like, that's a good idea. That's how Nauvoo was formed, by the way. The Mormons. The Mormons were persecuted. They were chased all over the landscape. They didn't live anywhere. They're like, hey, here's a swamp over here in Nauvoo. Let's drain it and make our favorite city there. And they did it, and it was very successful until they got shot because he went crazy and started taking 14-year-olds to wife. People didn't like that. That was quite the side story. A self-made real estate developer, Cornaro. I'm going to practice that. Cornaro, self-made millionaire. His friends used to call him Luigi. I'm not making that up. It's right here. As if that's not cliche. I can't call him Luigi without feeling like I'm, violating some political correctness there. His friends, Cornaro, they literally called him Luigi. So fat Luigi, who's like partying off all his real estate money from draining swamps, is like, oh shit, I'm going to die. He loved to throw parties, but as he neared 40, when was this? When was this? I don't know. It doesn't say. He suffered from a, quote, train of infirmities. As he put, his stomach pains, weight gain, continual thirst, and the classic symptoms of incipient diabetes. The cause was obvious. He partied too much. He says too much feasting. I'm saying that. Not thin Luigi. That's him saying, Peterson. Not thin Luigi balked. He did not want to give up his lavish lifestyle. But his symptoms got bad and worse and worse. He realized he had to make a change, or he'd never get to see his daughter grow up. So he summoned all his willpower. He cut himself to a Spartan diet that consisted of about 12 ounces of food per day, typically in the form of some sort of chicken-based stew, nourishing but not overfilling. And Luigi, not thin Luigi, says, in his own words, as he wrote about it, I constantly rose from the table with a disposition to eat and drink still more, he wrote. A year after this regime, Luigi's health had improved dramatically, and he put it, quote, I found myself entirely freed from all my complaints. He stuck to his diet, and by the time he had reached his 80s, he was so thrilled to have lived so long in good health that he felt compelled to share his secret with the world, and was probably bored. His partying times, all his party friends were gone. He says, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. So he penned an autobiographical tract that he called Discourses on the Sober Life, which is now going on my reading list. I want to read I want to read Fat Luigi's Discourses on a Sober Life. I do. Guy's a partier. I'm like, how did you drain that swamp? How can I get rich draining swamps? Although he was emphatically not a teetotaler's screed, he used to wash down his food, his broth with 2 generous glasses of wine. He was on the liquid diet. It's a Luigi's Italian. It's a Luigi Coronado. It's like a Luigi. I have nothing but chicken stew and 2 glasses of wine per day. Coronado's prescriptions lived to a long age. He died in 1565. Holy shit. His book was reprinted in several languages over the next few centuries, lauded by Benjamin Franklin, Tom Edison, and other luminaries, making it perhaps the first best-selling diet book in history. There you have it. You wanted to know what was the first best-selling diet book in history. Fat Luigi's Guide. How do you say it? To a Sober Life. Discourses on a Sober Life by Fat Luigi Coronado. Drainer of swamps, partier, and defender of daughters with his own diet. We're not talking about simply putting animals on Weight Watchers. That's not what we're talking about here. Back to reading Peter. Caloric restriction without malnutrition, commonly abbreviated as CR, is a precise experimental method on a group of animals that are fed as much as they want while experimenting on other groups with a similar diet. Animals that are restricted are compared in the controls. The results have been remarkably consistent. Studies dating back to the 1930s have found that limiting calories while meeting your nutritional requirements. And I think that's super important. I think I may have actually done this on accident. I'm going to talk about that later, hopefully. If you look at the picture of me in my about page on Twitch, when I was the most ripped I've ever been, I was largely on a liquid diet that I was basically, instead of juicing, which I got really into juicing. I was pretty heavy before that. I mean, not super heavy, but I was like, hey, I need to change. What can I do? So I started doing yoga. I also wanted to find a mate because I had been divorced, and I moved to a liquid diet. And as I'm reading this chapter, and the reason I bring it up is because I always look back to that section of my life because I was in really good shape. I had, I had, all of the indicators, right? Low percent body fat and just felt fantastic all the time. Not a lot of, bloating or inflammation or anything like that. And why was it? And what I think I was doing is I was really, really inhibiting my calories, but I was making sure to hit all my nutrients, but I wasn't doing the juicing. Some people say to do juicing, right? And we were getting ready to do the juicing, but instead of doing juicing, I still got all the fiber because I ground it up in my blender. And so my personal experience anecdotally confirms the rest of this chapter, and we'll keep going. But so I think that was one of the secrets, is that not only that, but I was making it a lot easier for my digestive system to process the nutrients. So I was getting a higher percentage. I have a feeling. And of course I was exercising, anywhere from 1 to 4 hours a day, every day. But I was doing things I loved. I went outside and paddleboarded and biked and everything. Of course, I didn't have a family with me or anyone to take care of, and I didn't have temptation, in the refrigerator all the time from amazing things that, your family might put in there besides you. But so anyway, the studies regarding animal lifespans have concluded very definitively that 15 to 45% is the increase in lifespan by reducing calories without eliminating nutrients. The effects seem to be dose dependent up to a point almost like a drug. The life extending effect of calorie reduction seems to be almost universal. Numerous labs have found the same thing. Lifespan not only in rats and mice, but also in yeast worms, fish, flies, hamsters, dogs, and even, weirdly, spiders. It has been CR has been found to extend lifespan in just about every model organism on the planet, with the odd exception of houseflies. It seems that across the board, hungry animals become more resilient and better able to survive, at least inside a well-controlled, germ-free laboratory. That doesn't mean that I'm going to recommend everybody to reduce all their calories. No. For one, CR's usefulness remains doubtful in a lab. Outside of the lab, very lean animals are more susceptible to death from infection, cold temperatures, while eating a bit less work for Luigi and for some of his patients, and for some of Peter's patients, it may not work for the whole population. Furthermore, there is no evidence that CR will truly maximize longevity in humans at all. We live in a much more variable environment than the animals described above. While it seems likely that it would reduce the risk of succumbing to at least some of the horsemen, it seems equally likely that an uptick in mortality due to infection, trauma, and frailty would counter that. Now that's when I start to really trust Peter, because I know he's invested in this thing and everything, and yet he's still willing to say that calorie reduction by itself is not enough. In fact, you're probably going to increase your mortality from other forms. Rapamycin, one of its side effects, which he's going to talk about in the rest of the chapter, is that it creates it hurts your immune system, so you're more susceptible to other diseases. And here it says, the real value of caloric restriction research lies in the insights it has contributed to our understanding of the aging process. That's its value. It's helped to uncover the critical cellular mechanisms related to nutrients and longevity. Reducing the amount of nutrients available to a cell seems to trigger a group of innate pathways that enhance the cell's stress resistance to metabolic effect. All of them are related in some way or another to mTOR. The first enzyme to be affected, which we have discovered, is AMP, otherwise known as AMPK for short. AMPK is like a low fuel light on the dashboard of your car. When it senses low levels of nutrients, it activates, triggering a cascade of actions. Well, this typically happens in response to lack of nutrients. It's also activated when we exercise. Hey, there's another discovery. I'm just going to pause here because Peter says this in the first paragraph, I think, of this book. He's like, the single greatest weapon we have in the arsenal against, bad aging, improved health span and lifespan. The single greatest weapon against that is regular, consistent, low volume, zone 2 exercise and some amount of strength training. He says it over and over again. I can't wait to get to those chapters, and we still have a lot of book to read. He's going to talk about that. I know he is, because I've heard him talk about it on his podcast. And I really want to know what kind of exercise he's going to talk about. So here we go. AMPK is activated when we exercise or if we have a lack of nutrients. That's just kind of interesting. So if you are not like nutritionally deficient, but if you're just a little bit nutritionally deficient, then it activates AMPK just like you were exercising. And this is, I don't know how he's going to tie this into eating practices and stuff. So this enzyme also stimulates the production of new mitochondria. Now, this is a term that you're going to hear all the time, particularly if you're an endurance athlete. Mitochondrial biogenesis. Mitochondria, the power center of the cell. Everybody knows that. It's kind of a meme. When those things break down, you break down, because that's how you get your energy, right? They make the ATP, which is basically the gas for your body. And when they don't work, and when you don't have that many of them, things go bad. You don't have lower power and all that. So how do we get? You want mitochondrial biogenesis. You want it to be created, and zone 2 training, zone 2 heart rate training, not power training. Zone 2 heart rate training is overwhelmingly proven to increase mitochondrial biogenesis, and now we're seeing that this AMPK enzyme, which is triggered from rapamycin, is also doing that. So, and that is triggered by, to some extent, a lack of nutrients on occasion. Restricting the amount of nutrients that are available via dietary restriction or exercise triggers the production of newer, more efficient mitochondria to replace the damaged ones. The fresh mitochondria help the cell produce more ATP. ATP is speed for your body. More importantly, AMPK works to inhibit the activity of mTOR, the cellular growth regulator, specifically seems to drop in amino acids that induces mTOR to shut down. And with it, all of the anabolic growth processes that mTOR controls. Instead of making new proteins that undergo cell division, the cell goes into a more fuel efficient and stress resistant mode, activating important cell recovery and recycling called autophagy. And as soon as I saw this word, autophagy, which means self-eating or self-devouring, I thought about the Star Trek Voyager, my favorite of the series, of the different the Star Trek series. There is an alien race called the phage, and they anybody know it? Anybody remember the phage? Anybody old enough? If you haven't watched Star Trek Voyager, it's definitely the best one. It's definitely the best one. It's got a lot of, it kind of goes downhill at the end. But so what are the phage? The phage, this is a mnemonic device, by the way, in case you're wondering. So in Star Trek, they encounter this group of people, and what they do is they take over ships, and they take the people out of the ships, and they chop them up, and they're really they've got this disease they have this like genetic disease that they got a long time ago, and they have to constantly like skin graft on other people's skins. There's this really disturbing episode where this one phage person kind of falls in love with I think it's Belana Torres, and he wants to like reduce her stress levels so that he'll maybe like her. So her shipmate, the red shirt that Belana's kind of friends with, they kill him and cut his face off, and they plaster his face on him, and the phage is like, "Hey, how do you like me now?" And Belana's like, "Ah!" It's pretty demented. It's kind of Silence of the Lambsy, if you know that. Anyway, so the phage means to consume and to renew, right? So autophagy means to eat yourself, not in a good way. Autophagy represents the catabolic side of metabolism. When the cell stops producing new proteins, instead begins to break down old proteins. That's what it does. That's how we redo our thing. Autophagy is essential to life. If we didn't have it, we could not live, period. In fact, if any organism that does not do autophagy immediately dies, if you stop taking out the garbage, yeah, you die. Your house would soon become uninhabitable. Which, by the way, seems to be the theme today. I don't know if you can see, but in my quote-unquote studio here, I have been cleaning and reorganizing. I've been autophaging my space so that it's less distracting and throwing out some of the bad stuff I'm not using anymore. By the way, I'm going to be giving out a bunch of assembly programming boards, about 25 of them. So stay tuned for that. I will do that but later. If you want to pay for shipping, I'll give them to you. I just have them here. I just want to get rid of them. And we're going to learn some assembly together using those boards eventually too, hopefully. So inside of trash bags, this cellular cleanup is carried out by specialized organelles called lysosomes, which package up the proteins and other debris, turn it into a pathogen, and then that gets eaten up and taken out. Not doing this causes Parkinson's, Alzheimer's disease, ALS, and a bunch of other stuff. Mice who can't do this will generally die within 2 or 3 months. By cleansing our cells of damaged products and other cellular junk, autophagy allows cells to run more cleanly and efficiently, helping them work more resistant to stress. So, get rid of the garbage in your life. But as we get older, autophagy declines. In fact, impaired autophagy is thought to be an important driver of numerous age-related phenotypes and ailments, such as neurodegenesis and osteoarthritis. Thus, this is Peter, I find it fascinating that this very important cellular mechanism can be triggered by certain kinds of interventions, such as temporary reduction in nutrients. The drug rapamycin, the Nobel Prize went to Japanese scientist Yoshinori Ahsumi for his work on elucidating the genetic regulation of autophagy. So all of this stuff has to do with how your body cleans itself up. In other words, it seems as though, I'm paraphrasing, but it seems as though if we restrict our caloric diet, that our body goes into cleanup mode. It's like, well, what do we got here? What can we reuse here? And that promotes a lot of good things apparently. Autophagy promoting effect is the one reason why rapamycin may have its future in longevity drug, according to Matt Kaberlane, a researcher from University of Washington. Even though rapamycin is already approved for use in humans there are formidable obstacles. Rapamycin was approved to treat patients indefinitely following organ transplantation. However, its purported immune suppressing effects just seem to be too daunting to overcome for a larger approval for the population. But this is starting to change. In 2014, that's relatively recently, 10 years ago, a study showed that rapamycin analog enhanced adaptive immune response. And they're like, what? Wait, what? Hold up a minute. It's actually helping immunity in these people, and other people are saying it's bad for it. So now they're starting to figure out, I'm paraphrasing, but they're starting to figure out that there's something about the amount of dosage that it can have an opposite effect. This is I find parallels to this in some of the mental illness drugs. Some of them, or pot for that matter. People don't know this, but if you OD on pot, you become extremely filled with anxiety. I know that because I did it, and it's completely opposite of the chill, yo dude kind of idea with pot. There are chemical compounds that in certain doses are helpful, and other doses like the antidepressant drugs that they give people. For example, antidepressant drugs, one of the side effects is if they get the dosage wrong, it makes you want to kill yourself even more. So dosage is important, and that's what they're now studying. Under some dosage regimes, it can enhance immunity, while under completely different dosages, it may inhibit immunity. Until a study appeared, I, like many, have given up on the possibility of rapamycin could ever be used to preserve life and be used as preventative therapy because of the side effects. They're just too bad. It seems odd that given different doses, it would have a thing. But if you look at the drug, if you look at it further, if you break down mTOR, this thing that rapamycin affects, you see that there's actually two complexes in mTOR. There's mTOR1 and mTOR2. So it's got two parts of it. And now they're starting to see that one of them is the one that affects immunity, and the other one is the one that promotes longevity. And so they're trying to create an analog, a chemical compound that isolates that and just affects the first thing. Now, if they pull that off, that's good news, right? It's no side effects and obstacles to clinical trial of rapamycin. To get around these objections, they did a trial in dogs, which Peter discloses he is funding. They're large animals. They have a lot in common with us. They share our environment, and there is always a similar to us. In a preliminary phase of the study, which he calls the Dog Aging Project, Kaberlein found that rapamycin actually seems to improve cardiac function in older animals. This is Dr. Kaberlein saying this. One thing that's been surprising to me is the different way that rapamycin not only seems to delay the decline, but seems to make things better. There clearly seems to be, at least in some organs, a rejuvenation function in dogs in one study that Peter Attia is funding. Kaberlein also observed that rapamycin seems to be to reduce systemic inflammation, which, God, that's like music to my ears. I fight with inflammation all the time for reasons I don't fully understand. Perhaps by tamping down the activity of so-called sentient cells, which are older cells that have stopped dividing, and all they're doing is producing a toxic cocktail of inflammatory chemicals, cytokines, chemicals that can harm the surrounding cells. Rapamycin seems to reduce these inflammations. It also seems to improve cancer surveillance so that our bodies get rid of cancer cells better. Kaberlein's group found that rapamycin appears to improve periodontal disease as well in older dogs. Stuff in your mouth. The main phase of the dog project involves 600 dogs, is underway, and it expects a larger clinical trial to be done in 2026. The dogs in the study are to follow a weekly clinical dosing schedule of rapamycin similar to the protocol in 2014. If the results are positive, it would be not surprise me at all that rapamycin for longevity purposes could become a regular thing. A small but growing number of people, including me, and a handful of my patients already take rapamycin off-label for its potential geroprotective benefits. Can't speak for everyone, but taking it clinically does appear to reduce unwanted side effects in my experience. So this is a drug that Peter's invested in, and he's saying, I'm prescribing it for myself and to my patients. It has never been approved, which, talk about privilege. Oh, I want this drug. I'm going to prescribe it to myself. We can't do that. So, what benefit can I take from this chapter away? Even so, the hurdles it would have to gain are certainly clear and broad, blah, blah, blah. There is a very low tolerance for side effects by the public and by regulatory agencies if you're talking about treating a healthy person, said Kaberlin. The intent is to slow the aging process for people before they get sick and to keep them healthy longer. So in many ways, it is the opposite of the traditional biomedical approach, reacting, when normally we wait until people are sick. And this is where Peter chimes in with his regular, I think, accurate observation that our system is not set up to fund proactive ways of increasing health. There's no way your insurance company is going to pay for your health club membership. They should, but they don't want to. There's too many people who stand to make lots and lots of money from you getting sick. So they don't want you to go to the gym. There's no way an insurance company is going to fund a drug, rapamycin, which is shown to prolong life and reduce use of other drugs. However, it is speaking the language of the pharmaceutical companies, which is cash. And hopefully, whether he gets rich or not, if this turns out to be one of these drugs that can actually prolong, we already know he talks about this. It's already in rampant use when we know the side effects are small compared to rejecting a kidney, right? It's a regular thing. It's been a regular thing for several decades. Or if you have a heart stent, all these reasons that you need to not reject it. It's like the go-to drug for that kind of thing. And I mean, he did mention that exercise has the same effect as reduced nutrients thing or taking this drug. So my takeaway from this is, I need to exercise more. And more intelligently, right? Because I can't pay. I mean, even if I had the ability to prescribe myself rapamycin, it's still in clinical trials. It's not going to be done until 2026. And even then, when it finally does come on the market, there are so many rich people who are going to pay for it first that we're going to be left out in the cold. Anybody who actually needs it, the insurance company might, because they can make money off it, but whatever. The real obstacle here is regulatory framework. Blah, blah, blah. The FDA has already given the green light for clinical trial of another drug called TAME, targeting aging with metformin. Metformin has been taken by millions of people for years. Over time, research noticed and studies have confirmed that patients on metformin appear to have a lower incidence of cancer than the general population. Aging is difficult, if not impossible to measure, blah, blah, blah. For the moment, though, let's think about the fact, this is the final paragraph, that all of what we've talked about in this chapter, from mTOR to rapamycin to caloric restriction, points in one direction, that what we eat and how we metabolize what we eat appears to play an outsized role in longevity. And in the next chapters, we'll take much more detailed look about anabolic metabolic disorders and help to escape from chronic disease, including what we eat. And chapter 6, which is going to be next week, that is the crisis of abundance. And we're gonna talk about that guy. He's got a lot of stuff in here. This is going to be a lot about the kind of food that we bring in. I can see he's got some diagrams here. Well, this is a long chapter. I'm going to make sure we have more time here. Oh my gosh. Whoa, make sure you don't put off reading next week's chapter. It's it says 20 pages of pretty intense detail. So that will be next week, chapter 6, the crisis of abundance. I'm going to take a few comments from the chat here and read through it and see if there's anything useful in here, which is the reason I appreciate you not sidetracking the chat while I'm doing this, because then I don't have to scroll through the stuff that's irrelevant. Normally I don't care you having irrelevant topics on my chat, but today I kind of do. How can one eat oneself? uh, you'd have more glucagon. I don't know. I don't know. Autophagy is also important to not get cancer. Yep. 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 Assembly program prevents the risk of acute autophagy. Indeed. Exercise. Autophagy. Did I say it right? Oh, thank you for the correction. Thank you. Thank you. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. I'm not a scientist, but I do appreciate good. So one of my mods, AKIP, says the way you pronounce it is autophagy. Autophagy. No, autophagy. Sometimes I pronounce things like with Russian accents, even though it's not. Some of the uh, competitors are big into juicing. Some of the top jujitsu people are into juicing. Interesting. Books on my reading list, so you get it soon. Look, I have nothing to do with Peter, by the way. I appreciate that Peter has been able to live the life he has and share with us. You don't get that a lot, right? He's kind of like a benevolent, smart, rich guy, and I appreciate that about him. Make money off selling unhealthy food, then make more money selling supplements. Yeah, welcome to America. Yeah, it's hard to sell a good diet compared to consuming supplements. Absolutely. Standard American diet is sad. Get it? Oh, sigh. A question about the beginner boost. Yeah, we skipped yesterday. And that is it. Maybe he's just a good guy who genuinely wants to help. He might be. He might be. What? Only eat what you can pronounce. It's bad advice for a biochemist. Okay, so that is kind of like a parenthetical comment I would like to make. Most of the time, when you talk about health, you get people who get kind of like dogmatic. They kind of separate themselves along certain lines. And one of the things I find great about Peter is he does not do that. So let me give you an example. I'm yoga certified. I'm an instructor. I've done the training. I've done all that, and I've been a part of the yoga community for some time. And I don't know that New Age is the right group to blame here, but it's not just New Age, right? It's this idea that pharmaceutical companies are bad, that they're the devil, that they're going to kill us all, that all they care about is profit. And I agree to an extent with those statements, but it's like saying Monsanto is bad. You can't just say Monsanto has saved millions of lives. I heard a thing, and I promise I have a point, but Monsanto's done a lot of horrible things, and I believe that they're the reason that I have allergic reactions to everything all the time. That and the people who make plastics and a bunch of. I have no evidence of that. I just think that minor changes to wheat, for example, have caused it to cause more reactions to people. I personally believe that. I don't know it, but by doing that same thing, they made rice resistant to blight in India, and they saved millions of people. And so what I'm getting at is that science, including capitalist-driven science that's out to make a profit, that doesn't like to do secondary studies, that is more likely to shut a drug down, that is not going to make them money, that are more likely to like Skrelly, like charge a lot of money for something that everybody has to live. Those things exist because of socioeconomic failures and political economic failures, and those things will eventually be addressed. But the thing I like about Peter, and I don't know why, I would really like to understand him as a human being better, because he comes at this without an avarice for pharmaceutical companies. I don't know if that's because he's invested in pharmaceutical companies and he stands to make money from them like everybody else, and he's just, any number of internet charlatans out there. I don't get the impression that that's him. He's, in my mind, the reason I believe this is because I saw his interview with Lance Armstrong, and I mean, I'm not going to say anything more. I went into it thinking, oh my God, he's going to like Lance Armstrong. When I hate him, he ruined cycling, blah, blah, blah. I was totally wrong. And I watched a 2.5 hour interview, and I'm super glad I did because Peter kept a very even kill center of the road thing here and stuck with the facts and the situation going on. He even said, I mean, the very disreputed Dr. Ferrari, famous name, right? Is the one behind all the doping and everything. And he's like, but it's too bad because the guy was a genius when it comes to pharmacological sciences. He understood how the body worked. And so Peter Attia's got this kind of weird, morbid fascination with this, evil scientist, sports doctor who, put Lance Armstrong on, quote, high octane, that's Peter's word, which was, doping drugs and stuff. But to Peter, so Peter's got this scientific fascination for how substances affect our bodies. And he's got the brain to understand it. And he's not, I still am kind of cautious. It's probably the Gen X in me. I'm kind of cautious. I'm like, okay, he's going to make money somehow. What's the angle here? Why is he doing it? But he continues to present anecdotes and evidence and scientific studies and things that are backing his things up that I can go confirm. I haven't. I didn't go read all those studies. If I were really scared of trusting him, I would do that. I can do that. It's in the book. In fact, that's one of the benefits of a book or long form communication is because you can dissect what's been said and you can even footnote it. You can go find it out. You can't do that in 200 characters on Twitter, right? Or on a bunch of flaming shitposts on Reddit. There's not a lot of this well thought out dialogue, and I wish there were more of that. That's not just because I'm an old guy. I think that would promote more healthy dialogue. The point I'm trying to make is that something about what motivates Peter, and obviously it's self-interest. The guy wants to live longer. He comes from a genetic background of people who don't live too long. He's obviously got a lot of money, and I don't care where he got it from as long as he keeps putting it to good use. And he, he's got this fascination with how chemicals affect our bodies. And he doesn't even like calling them chemicals because he knows that word is very charged, right? That the idea of, he calls them, he has a special word for them. He doesn't call them drugs either, right? But he sticks with the facts. He sticks with the thing. And he has he seems cynical enough about the studies to identify failures in the study and to look behind, okay, what's going on here, right? And I having somebody with that kind of like financial resources and intellectual resources on our side, I truly believe he's on our side, even though he's making money. Obviously, he's got to live and everything. Is a good thing. I actually really really appreciate that. So I do hope to meet Peter someday. I'm not. It's not like I'm such a fanboy that I'm gonna like turn into a puddle of mush in front of him. Like, oh my God, you're so amazing. But I respect him as a human being. He's done a lot with his life. He's also had a lot of travesty in his life, which he doesn't share, unlike me. At least not publicly. I haven't read any. He is a medical doctor, but he gave up medicine because he hated the medical institution, which I really love. And I think he's about my age. I think he's probably 2 or 3 years younger than me. So I think he qualifies as Gen X. And he's like, he was in the medical profession and he's like, no, screw this. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to be a part of this horrible system. He says, I'm going to do my own thing. And he's been very successful doing that. So I like that too. I like the fact that he is an example of somebody who said, don't get mad, get busy. If there's somebody who more than anyone else, frankly, in the modern, scope of communication and book writing and stuff that I have encountered, if there's one person who exemplifies don't get mad, get busy, do your own thing, to make a difference. I mean, Peter's the dude, man. I mean, he's making changes to himself when he realizes he's wrong. He's constantly questioning himself. He spends every second, obsessed in kind of a type A sort of way, with improving what people are doing and how they live and everything. And I mean, that just sounds like a big, that monologue was largely like, rah, rah, Peter. It is. It is that. It is that. You know why? Because I want more people like Peter to exist. And if you have the inclination to be one of these people, and several people in my chat are those people right now, I'm not going to embarrass you by naming you. But I am very fortunate to have um, several individuals who live lives like this and who demonstrate these type of lives where they're not willing to sit down and take the status quo. They actively go against the status quo and do whatever it takes to make that change. And that to me is absolute gold. It's the reason I do what I do. Because that gives me hope. That gives me hope that Peter and people like him, people in my chat, and people that I've befriended, and hopefully myself included, that we can actually make an actual difference if we, pool our resources and do the things we can. Now, I gotta tell you, I'm super jealous because I want to tell myself that if I had, the financial reason, I'm not poor. I'm not poor. I just am kind of in a bad place right now because I spent my retirement money on starting a business, teaching kids computer science, and then I had to deal with real estate developers. I'll talk about that another day. Actually, if you want to hear that, that's in my Don't Get Mad Get Busy podcast. It's a rather sad tale, but if we could get financial resources to people who remained stable and level-headed and didn't let the money go to their heads. They didn't do the Silicon Valley thing where they cash out, they flip, and then they go, quote, pursue other interests, right? Cashing out on their horrible company that they just landed a sell to IBM for or something. If we could find some more people like that, I would love to really get behind them, and I would certainly like to do more with that. Peter has been motivating me to do my own best to improve, and that means, for me, how can I do better? First of all, I can pay more attention to my health. Secondly, how can I, influence others to live better lives? Well, I can share at least some part of what I do with others, and I can do better there. And so I've started to stream more, and even though it's silly, hopefully it can help somehow create a community where people are dedicated to the same sorts of ideas. And that's it. That's me talking. I do love to talk. I get criticized for talking all the time. Truth is, I love to talk. Why do you think I made a podcast? You know who else loves to talk? Peter. He loves it. He loves to talk. We need people in the world who love to talk because there are people who don't love to talk. Right? Some of the people who love to talk are not worth listening to, and I many times that description matches me, but and other times though, me and others, I think we do need to talk more because we need to promote that. And on that note, it's time for me to not talk anymore. Oh damn! Thank you for the cheer there. I appreciate that. I guess this is the part where I put the plug in. If you want to, come join us on Twitch, be silly with us, clean your room with us, queue up YouTube videos. If you want to participate in the Beginner Boost Saturdays at 1:30, same time as this, except for every Saturday. We missed last Saturday. And what else? I've been regular IRL streaming, so I've been going outside on the bike, and I've been taking y'all with me. We do have on Friday. We have an art event. It's First Friday, and we'll be actually touring my wife's office for the first time. Doris, who walked in on the podcast here, and that's it. So there's lots of ways to participate in our community and to join us. I'm not as active in the Discord as I probably should be, but it is there if you want to go ask questions, whether it's technical or something about this. I don't even think we have an Outlive room. I'll make a note to go add one so that you guys can continue the dialogue, continue the conversation about the topic here in our book club. And book club is going to be a regular thing. Last night I was cleaning my bookshelf and I found a bunch of other amazing books that I want to go through together with everybody. And I will save those. So this is going to be a normal thing, and we'll probably keep it on Sunday. Thank you very much for being here. And that's going to be it for me. Bye.